7126, Collie Spotts-Falzone.
When people ask how I'm doing, I want to say my grandmother's frail fingers casually carry 87 years of life. Her arthritis tells stories. Her index finger points me down memory lane to this park. She tells me, again, how she met Grandpa. His college friends had a sunset picnic here, and he was there, as beautiful as an unsolved puzzle. This park is the place I finally learned what grief is. I learned that grief will humble you. Grief is knowing there is not enough success in this world to make you forget that your loved ones are dead. Grief is when people ask how I'm doing, I want to say my depression is a thirsty shadow that brings my joy like a dish rag and makes juice out of my smile. I want to say communion, noun. The share or exchange of intimate thoughts and feelings. But isn't it funny? When we take communion in church, we consume our sins, bear that burden, sink into the brokenness, but never say a word to each other. Grief should be a collective process. Despite the prevalence of grief in our culture, we operate under the insular concept that one will simply get on with life. However, pain that is not allowed to be spoken or experienced with another person turns in on itself, creating destructive thoughts and behaviors. Psychologist Megan Devine, in her book, It's Okay to Not Be Okay, advises those who want to be helpful to simply bear witness, to offer friendship without probing questions, and a listening ear for as long as mourners wish to tell their story. Initially, I was excited for this piece, simply as a way to exemplify this concept and expose my grief in front of a trusted community. And comments on this very topic have asked me to remove personal ties, to change the topic because this one just isn't moving enough, and to stop crying. These comments clearly display our continued lack of understanding and discomfort with the grieving process. But this is grief. This is pain. And if we're unable to experience it together, it's nearly impossible to fully heal. With the poetry on Grace and Grief by T. Miller, The Park by Caitlin Seal, When People Ask How I'm Doing by Rudy Francisco, Communion by Amy O's, Dear Grandmother by J.M. Zawa, and What Grief Is by Lisa Louise, a program. Stop telling me to move on. Instead, join my healing. Grief is an inconvenient translator. They say, how's your semester? They mean, I can smell your grief. They say, are you still living on campus? They mean, how much time are you spending alone? I'm sorry for your loss. You still have classwork to do. My communion has to be communal because as much as I wish my grief had an expiration date, it should be sold as bomb shelter decor because that shit lasts forever. Because my body is not a grave where we seal our lips like the coffin and are expected to move on after the last shovel of dirt is thrown. No, my body is the church, the one whose doors are open wide on Sunday mornings as feelings of love, hate, fear, and grief are shouted through the park, where my grandma worked for 30 years. Sometimes she still does, planting flowers and kissing trees. For the last 8 years that I've lived with her, we come here every Sunday, and she teaches me this dance. One that only fragile legs and wrinkled hands know how to. So when she asks how I'm doing, I want to say this sadness is the only clean shirt I have left. and my washing machine has been broken for months. I want to say she's dead. I can't afford this kind of grief right now. She didn't suffer. She didn't fight. We sit on an empty bench. She held me and said she was ready. I don't want her to go, but what am I supposed to say about life to this person who's already seen the smirk on death's face? Because in my church, communion is to be shared between friends and family. The burden of a life is never nailed to one person, because I've seen what grief, what pain, what destruction can do when swallowed in solitude from a chalice. I'll be there for you. I'll like every status you post, because hurt people is so damn cliche, but true. Grief is knowing you can't be held accountable for anything you do under the influence of it, and you can blame anything on the dead, so you do. Until somebody tells you you can no longer blame your behavior on your pain. And then grief is having to be good to your friends again. Grief is hearing someone you love tell you they can't forgive you. Grief is feeling that hell burn in your veins. She'll be missed. I haven't talked to her in 20 years. My communion is to be shared because I have felt the power of a room as we've all collectively felt one's pain. Because my grief deserves to be heard like hymns on a Sunday morning, and it will not be nailed to a box and buried 6 feet down because I want to say, yeah, I'm still really fucking sad. I want to say I get it. It's much easier to ignore sadness than it is to be responsible for making someone else happy. Grief is the reason I left my father at home alone to mourn while I came on the road to perform for strangers. Because grief does that. Grief is saying, I love you. If you died, it would affect me. I love you. I'll leave you someday, too. I love you. I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. I love you. Why are you retreating from everyone? I love you. Don't you have passion for anything anymore? I love you. Why are you being so selfish? Grief is when it feels like your heart is broken and someone is sitting on your chest, and what you want more than anything in the entire world is for it just to be a nightmare. And you just want to wake up, but then you do, and you realize that it's real, and that they're gone, and then grief is just being completely alone. Come here to the park. I stand where we stood and I try not to cry. I want to say I don't miss you anymore, but that's just not true. Because now the park is empty. There's no sunset picnic, there's no dance to be taught, and you're not here. Nobody is. But I can't keep going through these memories over and over again on my own.